And now we have a global a person who is leading in a global initiative, what we call waste-free oceans. We have in our earlier session we have looked at some panelists emphasizing on the need of cleaning the oceans, and now we have a specific initiative which is addressing this ocean plastic waste. Bernard, over to you. Look forward.
Yes, good day to all
Yeah.
from sunny Netherlands. I was asked to share some views on some trends in Europe on waste collection and recycling of it back into what we in Europe meanwhile call a circular economy, at least a strive for it. We are at the early stage of the first bench of a very linear economy, so it's a big strive. The picture in front of you, you see me sitting in front of beautiful post-consumer film bales, and I was sitting on a 3D printed bench made out of 100% recycled content. This was already a couple of years ago. So it's not a lack of technology. I think that's the first message. And as you've seen, I have a lot of free time, so I have a lot of heads on. Let me take you a little bit through it. Before starting to the next slide, we in Europe have looked the last 10, 20 years a lot to the packaging and packaging waste. And I think that is similar for countries like yourself in India, when I listen to the earlier speakers as well. Today, the second big group of activities where it's being looked at by the European Commission is building and construction waste. There are two reasons for it. One is it is a considerably huge market, is a lot of business to business activities. And most of all, and this is one of the drivers, building and construction in Europe is responsible for about 25% of CO2 emissions. And as you all know, there are some discussions around climate. I'm born and living in the Netherlands. I was born already below sea level, so melting icebergs have a special attention in my country. So let me take you a little bit through this. And recycling is part of a solution to that. Let me see what I can move to the next slide. So I've dig in preparation to a few slides on discussions to show you where we were at. When there was a discussion starting at the circular economy in Europe, everybody thought this is the holy grail. This is going to solve it all. But the way to circularity is not as easy as everybody thought. I found this beautiful picture of a roundabout in the UK, where you see 5 roundabouts on the roundabout. And this is symbolic for, let's say, all the discussions we had in the beginning. Everybody in every single association was talking in his own church and in his own surroundings. Whereas if you want to go to real success stories, you may have to leave your own safe ground to go beyond an outer box and go into the next step. The other one, if you look on the right side of this slide, you see the arrows. Like in India, the UK drive on the other side of the street as the rest of Europe. So if I, as a Dutchman, would come to the UK and I will do the circular economy drive on the roundabout, I would be in an accident within a second. So the discussion was symbolically of what do we mean by circular and how far do we go in circularity. Talking about the pollution which you started with, this was a message we got from the European Commission senior advisors a few years ago on a conference I organized in the Netherlands. And I think this is the perception of the politicians where we are at plastics. So it's cheap, it's easy, it's disposed of, nobody really takes care of it. If you put it on a landfill, it may leak into the oceans. If you think you can save everything by incineration, you are a bit naive because that's not it as well. So we have to look, first of all, to the design phase and what do we put in the market? And we also have to look at responsibility. And as you can see, maybe on the top, industry is not proactive enough. That was the main message from the politicians. So industry, if you do your job and you take this end-of-life issues more seriously, we don't have to come up with legislation. But if you don't do that, we will help you with legislation to speed up processes. And this is actually what happened a few years later. So this is just a grasp of some legislation which has come up since 2018, 2019. A plastic strategy. There's no metal strategy. There's no paper strategy. There is no glass strategy, but there is a plastic strategy. And it has to do with the way materials on. There is discussions on what's the role of a port, what's the role of a waste directive, what is the role of, let's say, retailers in EPR schemes, extended producer responsibility schemes. So all these topics have come up in the last few years and have led to European legislation. And then, of course, there are other topics. When you start about circularity, you have to think about differently about your product. You also, and from the earlier speakers, we heard that sorting and collection are the main topics. This is correct. If you collect something for incineration or landfill, it's easy because you don't have to think. If you think that you will get something back and use it again for a next life in a product, you have to think about material choices. You have to think about easy disassembly. You have to think about how to get it back. Do you do it with deposit systems? Do you do it with mandatory take-back schemes or whatever? So there's a lot of things which are happening. Then from the recycler side is also this was a slide a couple of years ago, poor sorting and poor collection. This was already recognized by the recyclers in the early stage. What we also saw is that the quality of the raw material going into the market has gone lower as well. So there is a lot of things going on. There's a lot of discussion going on between the recycling industry together with the converting industry on how to solve the issues. There's also a lot of discussions ongoing between them and the green dot systems who have been set up to collect and help to collect and sort the waste on sorting principles and quality of sorting. But still, there are a lot of challenges. Most important, in a lot of European networks, we saw that there was different definitions. So basically, what was also done by the European Commission is that in a lot of legislation now, we all have the same definition for what is recycling. And basically, recycling is bringing material back into a next life. In a lot of European statistics, incineration and even cement kiln was considered as recycling. This now is called energy recovery, and it's very clear. If you just collect something, it is collection, it's not recycling. So recycling in the European terminology has changed to be very precise. So you can only call something recycling when you turn a waste stream back into, let's say, the next generation of raw materials for a next product. What was also already recognized in the early stage is that if you replace virgin plastic with recycled plastic, you can save considerable amounts of CO2 emissions. In the region, it depends a bit on the applications, but you could, a lot of studies, LCA studies have shown that you're in the region of 30 to 40% CO2 emission savings against any virgin, if you use it on a very high level of recyclate. There's another example I will show you a little bit later that it's even much higher. And when you talk, of course, about how to put values and how to solve and how to inspire markets and drivers to take up recyclate, this is a tool which is being discussed at the moment. If you look, again, if you look at from a perspective, I just have to take care of some waste. This is how you look at it. And then you get the statements, recycling is expensive and collection is expensive and everything is expensive. But if you look at it from a circularity point of view, what do you save? What is the price of let's say, the impact on nature? And if you just turn it around, and this is just a slide out of one of many studies, this was a Denkstad study on some PVC waste. If you look at it from a completely different perspective, recycling actually is a game changer and is an economic viable solution. So if you need to think completely different if you want to take materials back onto a high level in the next relation. So you were talking that a lot of some of the material escapes the waste management and lands up in the waterways of the world. So we created in 2011 a foundation called Waste Free Ocean, which is active meanwhile in several parts of the world. And we look at several types of plastic gone astray. And we try to bring that back into loops, which is done by cleanup activities. We are working very close with, let's say, fishing communities in several parts of the world. We also tried to bring back the material instead of taking it out of the sea and putting it back on the next landfill, is to turn it back into a nice product. And of course, there's a lot of discussions on legislation, awareness raising, and education. And we're not alone to that. So what started as an idea from our offices in Europe has meanwhile gone out to organization with a lot of volunteers with worldwide spread, working mostly with volunteers. In India, we have a link with, among others, Afrosia. So we have sent him one of our tools to collect waste. He's more, you know, more about him probably than I would, because we never had a chance to meet face to face because of travel restrictions. But we look forward to doing that. So there are these kind of tools. There are many other tools. In the end, what you see happening here is an end of pipe issue, which could be solved probably earlier if you would have a better infrastructure of collection and waste management. And you could only do that if you do that by adding value to waste. What we do in the Americas, for example, is where they have similar issues. Can we use, and there is a discussion about building and construction, there's a discussion about lack of wood, for example, to build houses or parts of houses. So can we use some of those waste streams, which are complex and which are abundantly available, to make parts of houses or parts of furniture or part of that? So this is an example of some early day shelters for refugees, which were built with 100% post-consumer plastic coming from the beaches and etc. And this is a little bit how it looks like. So it's a multi-layer sheet. This kind of technologies are available today, but they're not implemented. So also, I think for a country like India, this may be part of a solution. I'm not saying it's the full solution, but look at these kind of options, whether you could replace wood applications, for example, with these kind of applications, because then you would give much more value to your waste streams and you will make it much more attractive for people to better collect it and to sort it and to bring it into the recycling schemes. Another one in the top 10 most littered item, we found a lot of fishing gear. This is a company in which I'm also involved in Denmark, which is meanwhile commercially recycling fishing gear on a high level. And there are setups, we set up schemes, and the European Commission has meanwhile also published a law for EPR for the producers of these kind of materials. And what did we do in the beginning? So in the beginning, nobody wanted the material, the recyclates. And I also heard that in earlier presentations. So we just tried out in all applications we could think of and found a lot of partners. So we turned, let's say, a fiber material into an injection molding grade or into an extrusion grade. And basically, we found out that the same material could be used in so many applications. And people were so happy to see all these results. But in the end, and we even made it into micronized material in rotor molding for children to sit on. But in the end, of course, this was our goal. Can we go back from ropes to ropes? And yes, we did it. So last year, we were very proud to announce that we produced the first rope with 97% post-consumer recycling content from maritime ropes. So the circle is there. And here's a proof of the closed circle. So the industry, maritime industry, is starting to uptake. With this learning, we know that we can take similar things from building and construction, because there's a lot of ropes in agricultural, there's a lot of ropes in the building and construction side. So with the technology developed for fishing gear and ropes, we can also start to take in these kind of input materials. And this was an LCA in the early days of this company in Denmark. We saved up to 82% of CO2 emission against virgin. There's a new LCA made because also in this factory now we have set to use green energy and did a few amendments. We are meanwhile above 90% CO2 emission savings. The unfortunate reality at the moment is that none of this saving has any economic value. And what has been a taboo in the European Commission to talk about it is that taboo is gone. So there is a discussion ongoing. Other things, a project in which I'm involved, this is a project on behalf of the producers of synthetic roofings in Europe. So here you see that we have set up a scheme to collect post-use roofing and bring it back into a number of applications. There are many more, but just to give you some ideas of what can be done. We also see a picture in the bottom that we bring in stakeholder discussions with people, let's say, from artificial leather industry or from the carpet industry, because they have similar issues. And then we are trying to see whether there are joint actions to be made, for example, to facilitate logistics and sorting centers. But what we also see, and I also heard it by a previous speaker, that if you collect something and you want to keep it clean, then somebody think they can use it as a local dump site and put other things into your container. So this is a story which we also see still in the building and construction. We also see it in the packaging collection, I have to say, but it's getting less and less because of the learnings. But in the building and construction, people still think waste is waste. So there's a lot of behavioral change to be worked on as well. Then back in history, this is a very old slide. I see if things have a value, people will be careful and try to get it back. Here you see a lady sleeping on the PET bottles to guard them, and you see somebody collecting EPS boxes because they want to reuse them. But at a certain moment of time, you also see that there is a need for an uptake back in the industry. So in the building and construction industry in Europe, we see that a lot of EPS post-consumer material is ending up, for example, in insulation sheets. There is a will of the industry to even grow that. And knowing that the European Commission has set in for, let's say, what we call a renovation wave, and with the prices of oil and gas at the moment, Europe will invest much quicker into insulation and of houses and industrial buildings. You will see that the uptake of recyclate will speed up in these markets as well. Then for some complex materials, we started to work on different technologies. And one of the technologies is what we call chemical separation. So here you have a multi-material product, a tile or a carpet or a membrane. And by using new technologies, we managed to split three materials, which all three now can be recycled on a much higher level. So you can either leave it into it and make some more robust products, or you can try to separate with new technologies into monostreams. And from there, of course, then take it into the next generation of products. Here you see another example. This was a test done with carpet waste. And here you see that we really got the layer and the materials out of each other. So it's still in a relatively experimental stage. Interesting enough, now with 5 different sectors in Europe, we have jointly invested into a pilot plant to further develop this technology. This plant will come into operation sometime this year in one of the European countries. Here's some applications in the building and construction, which are already made with very high percentages of post-consumer waste materials. You see that also there the green procurement is playing an important role to stimulate uptake. So it's not new, but it has to speed up in there. Because in the end, if you add value to waste, and if you can make products which have similar qualities as the equivalent with virgin material, you should prefer this kind of applications with a higher recycling step. So coming a little bit to the end of my intervention is what is needed. I think, and that goes not only for India probably, but also for many other countries. There is a need to further invest in waste management infrastructure, especially on the sorting and on the collection side. If you make the wrong choice in your way of collection, in the end, it will become much more expensive and much more troublesome to sort various streams on. Of course, there's also a very big work to be done on the design phase. If you design something which is completely difficult to recycle or to sort, it doesn't have any chance at the end of life. In some countries, you need to formalize the informal sector and maybe create green jobs. So that's a social aspect. If you go for circularity, then go for high quality recycling plants. Don't go for cheap solutions. On the other hand, from an outlet point of view, you need to stimulate the outlet for recycled plastic. We see that, especially with drops of polymer prices once in a while, then you see a fallback that people will go for an easy solution. So you need to do that as a government. And one of the tools is, could we put a value on CO2 emission savings? There has been discussions in my country. An NGO agenda took, let's say, our famous oil company, Royal Dutch Shell, and also the Dutch government to court. And after a long fight, even up to the High Court, they actually won the claim that those companies and our government did not do enough to safeguard our country from the CO2 emissions threat surrounding us. And we are discussing whether, for example, the emission trade system, which is in place, which today has a value of around 60 euros, give or take a bit, whether that should not be lifted to a level of, let's say, minimum 150 to 200 euros. And in a recent discussion with them, the reflection is like follows. If in Europe, if let's say the value of CO2 emissions is roughly 50 euros, people will step away from coals. If it's at 100, people will step away from gas and go to, for example, hydrogen. So if you really want to make a transition, a speedy transition, you may have to think about, let's say, CO2 values of a minimum of around 150 to 200 euros a ton to really speed up market turnarounds. So this used to be a taboo. It's no longer a taboo on a political level. Then, of course, you also need to stimulate the uptake of greener products, maybe stimulate products with high recycling content who may then get, let's say, a return. So if you, on the one hand, you have to pay, and on the other hand, you can get a bonus when you uptake recycled content, that will be very good. Although not everybody is a fan of legislation, it proved that legislation is needed to come to a next stage. On the other hand, there's also a lot of money involved in setting up high quality recycling plants. Estimates in Europe, it's about 1 million euro for about 1,000 tons capacity. And you need roughly 25,000 tons to be commercially viable in these surroundings. On the other hand, you see that really, if you do it, you've got a return on investment of around 5 to 10 years. But you got a direct investment from day one in the social and environmental sector. But this has not a value directly. We see more and more, and for example, a country like France is already pushing now with the first mandatory EPR schemes for building and construction products, where the producers of products are also liable for end-of-life issues and have to put financial support to collect and to also take back the material. There's also a push, partly by law, to redesign for products which are poorly designed, and I think that will be more. There is a landfill ban law already agreed upon in Europe, but not all member states have actually implemented the law, so there are still open landfills, but they will be closed over time to push people to go back to recycling. And in my home country, a small country like the Netherlands, we have about 17 million inhabitants, which in a country like India, I think it looked like peanuts. But we have 20 specialized high quality recycling plants, with some with food grade contact and everything. So a country like yours should be able to have a multitude of those. If we look at the building and construction recyclers, we only have about 5. So this is typically a market. Here you see that, let's say, the people looked at the packaging waste more than on the building and construction waste. So my expectation is that the recycling for building and construction waste will grow in the years to come. And then this was a take-home message. Yes, we are, with the way of consumption of our materials globally, we are doing harm to the environment. So let's take action while we still can, and let's think out of the box. And I think this man had a great statement on that. So we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. Thank you very much for your attention.